Are you getting married and you're curious to learn about the numbers and what can go into a wedding financially? Today we are breaking down a wedding, and the ultimate cost of that wedding, give or take, was $63,365 with some, what would I say, caveats to that. So I have with me today Sabrina. She is a wedding planner with J29 Events, and today we're going to break down a wedding that was in Portland that had 116 guests and again spent $63,000.
So this wedding was really exciting. It was a couple that had planned to have an overseas elopement in Italy, and due to COVID, they ended up not being able to do that. So they ended up coming back here and employed J29 to help bring a bit of that vision to life, but knowing that they were then getting married in Portland as opposed to Italy, we had to shift a little bit as far as style and design went. So but they were also able to have a lot more of their family and friends that lived here attend, which made for the need for a shift in venue and a shift in kind of the mindset of what that day looked like for them.
So let's get into the numbers. Start breaking me down on details.
This is a wedding budget that we get a lot from a lot of people. They essentially come at us and say, when we have our initial inquiry, they say, okay, we're in the range of like $60,000 to $80,000. We're going to be somewhere in the realm of 110 to 140 people. We're not really sure where it's going to land. Can we have a full wedding and a full wedding roster within that budget? The answer is yes. And typically when we get any inquiry, we try to give you almost like a high level breakdown, because at the end of the day, a lot of people don't know what weddings cost these days. And I think that's one of the reasons that we were really excited to talk to you today, just because we feel like there's a lot of people that are getting disheartened about the realities of wedding planning and what you can afford these days. So we wanted to really break these down so that people could understand what things cost. And again, just to preface this was a wedding that was planned in 2021, and then it happened in August 2022. Essentially, that means that for 2021, they booked those vendors at those price points. And every year since COVID lately, we've seen a steady increase of around 10 to 15% across the board in every category for cost. Everybody knows what's going on, but there's huge labor shortages everywhere. Flower prices are through the roof, which makes it really challenging. With that labor, the delivery charges are higher for a lot of rental items, as well as food costs are like the highest they've ever been. So that makes catering, bar and beverage also very expensive. So keeping that in mind, that this was a wedding that was planned in 2021, and then in 2022, it's when it was executed. Just understanding that under this budget would be helpful, I think, to a couple trying to plan in a similar budget range for 2024. So essentially, this was a full service planning package with J29. So this was all the bells and whistles with us. It was located, as you mentioned, in Portland and the Portland metro area. They had about 116 guests in attendance. They had a ceremony at a nearby church, and then paid for transportation for all of those guests to a local venue. The reception was in a beautiful indoor-outdoor space that had a grand patio, really nice modern neutral lines on the inside that really allow you to build it any way that you imagine, which is always a nice kind of blank canvas to work from as a planner. They had a full floral package, which we'll get into later. They did have a plated dinner and a full tablescape. They wanted all the pretty things that everybody likes. They also, one of the things too with this venue is they include the tables and chairs, as well as market umbrellas and lounge furniture. And they were actually tables and chairs that this couple wanted to use. So that was really important, and that saved them a lot of money. So let's get into the budget about it. Essentially at the top of the line, like I said, you can expect a 10 to 15% increase across every one of these categories year over year. So booked in 2021. So essentially it's been a full 2, almost 3 seasons since this happened. So that's something to keep in mind for any couples planning for 2024. So full service planning package, $7,500. The venue at this time was $9,000. And one thing I want to say about that is, as couples are looking for a venue, it's really important. A lot of them have their own rentals. A lot of them have tables and chairs and all sorts of things. make sure you see those rentals before you sign on, because if they have rounds and white folding chairs, but you want farm style tables and like more like a wood grain chair, you're not going to use those rentals. So it's actually not something you're going to save on. So that's really important to make a note of. If you are looking at a venue that has rentals that come with it, you want to make sure it's what you actually want. Photography was $4,000. This was definitely cost-wise. I wouldn't say on the low end, but I think a lot of couples struggle with the cost of photography and videography. And for some reason, they have it in their heads that it's at this kind of price point as it's been for the last like 10 years, but it's not like that anymore. So I would say you have that, manage that expectation within your own planning needs, that videography and photography has definitely gone up. Catering and bar, this one was at $18,135. The bar that they offered were curated cocktails during cocktail hour, beer and wine, and then later they didn't have a full open bar. They actually had drinks made out of the ingredients that were from those curated cocktails in order to kind of curb the costs on that, which we offer up to a lot of our couples. It works out really nicely. Entertainment, they had a DJ. They used sound at the church and then had a DJ for cocktail hour and reception. They used one of our partners who not only does like soundboard DJing, but he also does acoustic. So it was a really nice touch to have the acoustic guitar and singing happening during cocktail hour. But yeah, I think it's something it makes a really nice entry point for all of your guests coming into cocktail hour. It changes things up a bit, and it's nice to have a little bit of variety. Florals, like I said, they had a full floral package. So at the time in 2021, this was a totally reasonable budget for a floral package. Mm-hmm. I will say that now florals, I believe they've gone up 3 times cost per stem since last summer. It's bananas, which is, we love all of our florists that we work with, and we know they are hustling and working so hard. Labor is more expensive. Just materials in general are more expensive. So that's one that we've seen a really big price increase across the board, but we want our couples to know that they're worth it. And if florals are something that are important to you, we budget accordingly when we do all of your budget allocation.
Yeah. The last the last video I just did was Shauna from J29. We broke it down. Mm-hmm. I think they spent upwards of $20,000 on their floral alone.
Yep.
And that was like $100,000.
And some people, they say it's not a priority.
That was an $85,000 wedding. Yeah.
I think, yeah, that was between 80 and, yeah. So it's tricky though, because a lot of people say they don't like florals, but then sometimes we'll get all their boards and their inspiration photos and it's tables everywhere, like covered in florals. So that is one of the things that we'll talk about later too, but picking your priorities is really important. Yep. So any couple budgeting for a wedding at any level, you have to pick your priorities and see where that money is going to get spent. And then we can allocate accordingly to get you what you want.
Yeah.
So bridal hair and makeup, $850, signage, $850, which again, signage is one of those things that some couples want a lot of and some they don't. So in this case, they wanted paper menus, they wanted the welcome sign, they had a really cool audio guest book, which was really interesting and different. So that was fun. Yeah. So that's just something that, that's also a choice. That was something that was important to them that they wanted on this one. Transportation, people never know how much transportation costs. They always drop their jaws when we tell them what it costs to send 100 to 150 people in town from a church to a reception. Almost every time they're like, whoa.
So that transfer, because I'm experiencing that now, right now. So that transportation cost was just to get people from, how did that work? Did they park at the reception, then get bused to the church and bus back?
They park at the church, pick up everybody there. Well, typically what we do is we have them pick up at a central point, so like a hotel block. Yep. So we'll have staggered charter buses that pick up at a hotel or a location, say if it's a parking lot, if that's where they want to be picked up and dropped off. But usually it's around a hotel block. We have them pick them up, bring them to the church. They come back to the church, pick up all the guests, bring them to reception, and then come back to reception at the end of the night and have the closeout, bringing them back to the hotel.
Great.
Cake, $830. and they didn't have any additional desserts in this one. The family did bring their own, it was very Italian. They brought their own Jordan almonds, like a buffet of Jordan almonds, which I loved, that were from Italy, which was very cool. So that was important to them, and but that was not included in their dessert budget. So that was just for the cake. Their rentals were $46.50. They didn't have to bring in a ton of furniture because luckily this venue had tables and chairs that they wanted. They had mobile bars that they wanted, lounge furniture, market umbrellas for the patio. So they really did save quite a bit on that. However, if this was a couple that wanted, say, like farm style tables that weren't available at this venue, you would have to pay to bring those in. Yeah. And it costs money to do so. Stationery. So this was actually for save the dates, invitations, and thank you cards, including postage on Minted. Minted is one of our partners that we use. So instead of using like a signage or a stationery person to do the invitations and all of the different paper that goes with that, this couple decided to use online. But that is a separate cost. So that was something that was included in this budget.
Okay.
So all in, as you mentioned, was just over $63,000. So $63,365 for their total spend. I will say though, the next piece we're going to go into is that didn't include. I'm going to say what it actually did include and what was excluded from that budget.
Perfect.
So one of the things that it's really important to note when you go through budgets like this is talking about how many hours do you actually get. Because for that photography budget, for that videography budget, and the venue and the planner, what are you actually getting as far as labor and people being feet on the street? The planner, so our full service package includes 12 hours on site with one assistant. That's what it comes with. We can always customize it outside that, but that's the baseline. For the venue, they got 12 hours on site, which is awesome. Photographer, 9 hours with one assistant, and same with the videographer, which was plenty for this. And that was enough to get the getting ready shots at the hotel, travel to the ceremony location at the church, then travel to reception, get all the details, cocktail hour reception, and just enough dancing before it gets a little crazy.
Rowdy. I always tell my couples when,
it's a little rowdy.
As a videographer, I always tell my couples when looking at hours, I start my wedding collections with 8 hours. And usually if they're getting married, and everything's happening at one location, that can work really well. But ultimately what I tell them is when we look at the timeline is that I want to see that the team can get there at like 30 to 60 minutes before they put their dress on and stay at least 30 minutes into open dance if they want stuff above and beyond that. But if they don't get that, then it becomes if it's multiple locations, then you're looking at 9+ hours because you're just accommodating for the drive time in between.
Right. It's planes, trains, and automobiles. And to move the vendors and the people, it just takes time. And, it's always nice because when you have it in one place, there's less room for error, right? So there's less room for a crash happening, construction,
That's a whole nother
anything.
video we could talk about. I'm like,
if you want to, I
have a blog post. If you want a stress-free wedding, one of them is if you want to bring it to one location, and there are tons of benefits and a lot of things that you're not opening yourself up to in terms of things that can go wrong. So
yes, exactly. You're not wrong. Yeah, we'll do that one next time. Sounds good. So a couple of things I wanted to make a point of that were excluded from this budget because, again, I actually chatted with the couple about this because, wanted to make sure they were comfortable with us even discussing this before we did it. But we chatted and she's like, oh, yeah, there was a lot more than just that. Because they decided to take a lot of those costs on themselves. So one thing that wasn't included in this, vendor tips. They tipped out every single vendor.
What do you typically recommend for couples?
Which is amazing. That's a whole other conversation. So we have it by category. We actually have our
conversations we have to have now. All right.
We have so much to talk about, Craig. So we actually have a tipping guide that we give to each of our couples that outlines percentages and what's like the industry standard. We hire vendor teams that we trust and know, and they're tried and true, and it's almost like going to summer camp every time that we have a wedding. So we make sure that you only have the best and the brightest, and those people, tips are always appreciated, never expected, as we always say.
I never expect a tip, but man, is it a cherry on the cake?
Oh, it's always like a treat.
I'd rather the couple just spend the money with me to buy something else, like a deliverable, than give me the tip money. I'd rather,
oh, okay.
Yeah, honestly, yeah, I'd rather them just, like, hey, you give me this tip, I'll just stay an extra hour or whatever it is. Like, I'd rather you just get something. But again, it's like, puts a smile on your face.
Absolutely. Yes. Well, and I think the other thing too, and we even talk about it, is like not everybody can afford a tip at the end of the day, which we completely and totally understand. Wedding planning is extremely expensive, especially right now. It's bananas. And at the end of the day, a review is also, like, for me, my love language is like having people, positive reinforcement, giving that credit. And so just like sometimes when I get that stellar review, it's just like, it just makes like your month. It's pretty great. So we've been very fortunate to have a lot of couples in all of our seasons they treat us very well across the board, either financially with reviews, etc. But we're pretty lucky. We have a lot of great clients.
I would say if you're thinking about a tip or you can't afford a tip, it never crosses my mind. Like if I leave a wedding without a tip, I'm never thinking, oh, I should have got a tip or something like that. And so if I could feel how
it's
maybe a couple might feel a pressure of that, and I would just say, if you can do it and you want to do it, great. But if you're like, no, I'm not going to tip, and then you have a great experience, you go leave a review, A-okay. Or neither.
100%.
A-okay.
Yeah. Either one. Yes. Yes, absolutely. So a couple of the things that aren't included in this budget were she decided to pay for her own bridal gown, her shoes, and her accessories. So none of that was included. None of the groom's suit. He actually had a custom suit made, which, it was very nice. Again, it was like a family thing. But yeah, they had a custom suit made, shoes, accessories, all of that was not included in the budget. Their wedding rings were also not included in the budget. That's pretty typical, I feel like. When we go through our initial inquiry and then kind of go through a high level with each client, usually people don't include the wedding rings in there. There's a handful of things that are just like, no, it's not really included in the budget. So if people are thinking that's typically included, you totally can. But we find that people usually just pay for that either out of pocket or through other funds. Rehearsal dinner was not included in this one. Neither was the bachelorette or the bachelor party for that matter. And then wedding favors were actually provided by the groom's family. They brought their own limoncello from Italy and put it in teeny tiny bottles, which was like perfect at the end. Yeah, it was great. But those things all cost a lot of money. So if you think about that, and that's why this is in that 60 to 80 range.
So even though we said it was 63, as you're seeing now, and in the other videos we did breaking down price, you're seeing there are all these additional costs on top of it.
She would guess it was closer to like 70 to 75. Okay,
that's helpful.
Which feels about right. But for what this was. So one of the things that I wanted to do in this podcast was break down what the pretty place setting costs. With all of the influences with social media and on Pinterest and just all of the visuals that are out there, I feel like all that's thrown at our couples are these beautiful, intricate place settings, which we love, but nobody ever really tells you what they cost. We had a bride joke last season that she was just like, nobody tells you that this place settings alone are basically a month of your salary. Like, just because it is. I mean, once you add it all up, it's beautiful. We love it for the details. And we have some couples that come to us and say, tablescape is our jam. Yeah. We want the pretty photos. We want that beautiful feeling when you walk to the table that's got all the accoutrement, right? It's got everything that you... that's what brings the vision to life, is that tablescape, which, I mean, we agree with that, but it's also expensive. Yeah. So this is a breakdown of what this place setting in front of you costs. So it does not include, I just want to say up front, it does not include the table linens. It does not include candles or candle holders, which I feel like I could do a whole different conversation about that. It does not include the florals or delivery fees broken down from the rental company. Oh, yeah. So this is just straight up plates, flatware, napkin, printed menu, pretty water goblet, and modern wine glass. So as you can see, basically it's $3.50 for one set of the 4-piece flatware, 75 cents for the salad plate, 75 cents for the dinner plate, the colored water goblet, which has become really popular and a nice way to kind of add a pop of color. That was $105, but those range now between like $2 and $3 as for a 2024 wedding, just to keep, frame of reference. One modern wine glass, which not everybody likes to have a wine glass on the table. This couple did not do the tableside wine, but they wanted the look of the full tablescape. So we added everything on there so it was included, which a lot of people do. There was one printed menu with $150 a piece, and then $295 for the linen blue napkin. So all that in, it was $1135 per place setting times 116 guests, bringing you just over $1,300 on just the tablescape stuff. So if that's something you want to invest in, it's really important. Another thing I'm going to say about candles too, we use the Yummy brand candles quite a bit, the dripless ones, and the cost for a box of 12 is around $36. So keeping in mind, everybody loves all the pictures of the big taper candles with, you know, set in the candle holders, the big candlesticks with the hurricanes around it. So just the candles alone are $36 a box. So if you think about, we usually put 5 per table, like a long table. So if you do the math on that, it runs up pretty quickly having the hurricane, the candle holder, and the candle, having it all on the table. So one of the ways that we recommend is that if you love the look of like a taper candle, put it at your head table. Like if you're having a head table, put it there. Like make your head table have all the pretty things. If you can't afford to do all of these things, or if you need to cut and kind of prioritize, like just completely deck out your head table having all the things that you wanted. If you want the velvet napkins, if you want the taper candles and the fancy goblets, do it there. Because then you still get those detail shots. You get to enjoy it because really that's, you know, you want your guests to enjoy it, but it's also something you really want. So if that's where you have to kind of curb your budget a little bit, that's a good place to do it.
That's awesome.
So a couple things to note about this, which I think was an in-town wedding. So everything was in town. It was all within the Portland metro area. The church was, the location was, and all the vendors except for 2 were actually here. They were based out of Portland. So the travel and accommodations were super minor. Typically there are going to be fees and you have to pay for accommodations for vendors when you book out of town. So just keeping that in mind. But they're also worth it. Like, for example, our videographer on this one was from New York, and she was amazing, and we wanted her, and so did the couple, and they were willing to pay. So we brought her out here, we worked it out, and yeah, and she's always wanted to come to Portland, so it worked out nicely.
That's awesome.
As I mentioned earlier, this reception included tables, chairs, lounge furniture, market umbrellas, 2 mobile bars, all that stuff. If they don't have it, you're going to have to bring it in. You're going to have to pay for the rentals, and that's big furniture that you also would be required to have labor to set those chairs and labor to set up those tables. So that's just something that they really saved on with this venue. So it was worth the price point for them. One of the things that we tell everybody is that when you plan a wedding, think of it like a construction project. You have to expect about a 10 to 15% variance that you're going to pay. Whether you splurge for the extra like fancy photographer that you want, or you really decide that you want that photo booth and then that's a little bit more, or you know, you're having the plates that were more expensive that your mom really liked and so you decided to use those instead of the other ones that you were kind of about. If you plan ahead for it, you will be less shocked, and it helps manage your expectation about what that budget looks like. So for example, if your tippy top budget, like we can't go any more than this, is $80,000, plan for closer to 70 so that you can allocate those funds accordingly. But when that vendor, that dream vendor comes up, you're like, I really want this, or I really want to add the welcome sign, or I really want the extra florals going down the staircase and extra candles. You have that wiggle room to be able to do it without feeling like, now we're at 85 or now we're at 86, and it just keeps climbing. I would say that's something that we are very good at J29 is that we manage the expectation of budget. We're very clear about where you're at. We never want to spend more money than you're wanting to or put you in the poorhouse by any means. We want to give you the day that you want. But we also, our job is to make sure that we communicate to you where you're at throughout that planning process, because things can go off the rails quickly if you start adding things in. And so it's our job to say, okay, you really like that. Let's pull a little bit more back here. Or let's, if you want to put more funds into this, okay, well, we can take this down. Maybe we'll take one of the apps off of cocktail hour and see where that puts us, or change the structure of the bar. So I think that's one thing just to keep a note of, is like, you can have your cake and eat it too. It just means you have to pick and choose priorities of where you want your money to be spent.
Thank you guys for watching this. Hopefully you kind of got to see, we pulled back the curtain a little bit, broke down the wedding. Our goal with this content is to be as helpful and transparent with you guys as possible. We know it's not easy, and we want to make content like this to help you guys in that journey and in that process. If you want, you can reach out to J29. This is Sabrina. She's a wedding planner with them. She's phenomenal. You can reach out to her and get this conversation started for you to see what your budget would look like, and they can guide you on that process, and you kind of see how they do it now. My name's Craig. I'm with Watertown Films. I'm a wedding videographer. If you want your wedding documented, you could reach out. You can find both of our information down below in the description. With that being said, thank you guys so much for watching. We'll see y'all in the next video, and thank you, Sabrina.
Thanks, Craig.